Say hello. discussion, Women, Peace, and Security, the critical role of women in advancing a two-state solution. My name is Nancy Bernstein, and I'm on the steering committee of the J Street Women's Leadership Forum. We think this issue is one of the elephants that's not in the room. So I also want to thank Carol Winograd and Molly Freeman and Joanna Goodman-Freeman for putting together this terrific panel of women. So anybody whose cell phone is turned on, please turn it off or put it on vibrate. Towards the end of the session, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. So when the time comes, please come up and line up or come to. Is it this microphone, Rachel, that people will be asking questions from?
They can. I think this mic is also live, so we can pass it around.
Okay, so I guess we'll be. Oh, do people need to go over there, or will we pass it around?
We'll pass it around.
Okay, great. So before we begin, I'd like you to take a brief moment to meet somebody new and turn to the person nearby who you haven't met and talk about why you're here today. Wait a minute. You have one thing. You only have 2 minutes. Cashman, who's going to shepherd this discussion, facilitate it. She's the author. Michaeli Cashman is the author of Spinning Threads of Radical Aliveness, Transcending the Legacy of Separation in Our Individual Lives, and a co-founder of Bay Area Nonviolent Communication. She blogs at The Fearless Heart, and her articles have appeared in the New York Times, Tikkun, Waging Nonviolence, Shareable, and elsewhere. Michaeli?
Thank you. Hi. It's exciting and a little nervous to be doing this. It's actually the first time in my life that I'm moderating a panel. I've done a lot of other kinds of facilitation and leadership, but this particular format is new to me. And I want to start with a little story that to me illustrates both why it's so important for this kind of focus on women's leadership in political process and why it's such a challenge. The story was told by Jean Shinoda Bowler when she did a public reading of her book, Gather the Women, Save the Earth. I think I'm saying it right. The story is that in some place where there were warring factions, they were asked, I think because of the resolution that you supported, Sanam, that you drafted, they were asked to include women as 50% participants. And they said, oh, they didn't really want to do that. And why? Because the women would just compromise. And well, we're not talking about specific women, we're talking about an overall trend, which is that women know how to work things out. I mean, if you remember a year ago, or however long it was, when the entire country was in an artificial standstill about the budget, it was women in the Senate that brokered the agreement, women from both sides of the political debate. So there's something that we women have to offer, and there's also an extraordinary obstacle, or many obstacles. And I'm hoping that some of these questions will emerge today through the discussion that we might have here on the panel. I want to just say a couple of reasons why I think it is important. I think because of the way that we're trained, and it's not biologically given, because of the way that we are trained, we exercise our collaboration muscles more than men. And for the most part, collectively, at least in the Western world, in the last 300 years, our collaboration muscles have atrophied because we've been in competition and command and control. So there's something here for us to give people that doesn't exist elsewhere, not as much. We offer a different model of leadership that is more collaborative, that is more stewardship leadership. Yes, I know that individual women try to emulate whatever it is that is common norm in terms of leadership. And that is a tragedy. But the more women are present, the less the pressure is on them to emulate models that are not working. So because we're starting late, I'm going to skip the rest of the things that I was going to say and let the women speak for themselves. And I'd like to introduce them. And instead of reading their bios, which all of you have in your handout, I want to say a few things that stand out to me about them as a whole. One is, all of them care about women and feminism. And the questions, the theoretical and practical questions that that raises are alive and real for all three of them, based on my communication and my reading. They're all taking leadership. They're showing the world what is possible, and they're taking leadership as women, not hiding the fact that they're women, but proclaiming it. Tell me if I'm saying anything that you don't recognize about yourself. And they also all know in different ways how far we are from where we would want it to be, which is women taking full participation in political processes at all levels. So with that, I would like to tell you how I've thought of structuring this panel. And I know maybe some of you have heard this old joke, how do you make the goddess laugh? You tell her about your plans. So I have a plan, and we are starting late. So the plan may or may not materialize, but I had a thought of having some questions that are identical questions to all three of them. And then I thought about one question each that is unique and specific to her work. And I thought that would give us a way to look at both the common themes and the uniqueness. So the first question that I want to ask you is, what gives you hope? What gives you hope as a woman leader? And in particular, what's something that you've seen that nurtures that hope for you?
Okay. I think I've earned the right to start first because I flew here 16 hours. I'm still jet lagged. Okay. So what gives me hope is people like you. And I want to shift the conversation from women versus men because I do actually believe in men. I love men. And I come from a family where most of the support for my leadership work came from men, actually. I have examples of strong women in my family, but my mom and my father and my grandfather were there for me all the time, and now my brothers, my brothers-in-law, everybody I know, as even my students and male students are supportive. So I always think of men as equal partners. Even if they don't think so, I still think that they are equal partners, and that what gives me hope. There's no conflict here. It's rather more a relationship that is a little bit complicated.
That is so optimistic of you. I only have sisters, so my father, I have to say, if I want to relate to what you're saying, then I will take it from there, because I think the first time ever that my father feels that he can be almost proud of me for the first time in his life is when I became a member of Knesset. So up until then, he was mainly embarrassed by everything that I said or did. I mean, not only was I talking about women's rights and equality and everything, being so disobedient, but I was doing it in public. And then when I became a member of Knesset, all of a sudden it made sense to me. So, to a certain extent, of course. So I think this is maybe something that can give me hope. I mean, men like my father can see a woman member of Knesset and feel that this is a reason to be proud of her, that yes, maybe we can maybe also do something with men that you know.
It occurred to me that we have on the panel an American, a Palestinian, an Israeli, and an Iranian. And all happen to be women.
I'm not American.
Americans.
I actually am from Israel. I have lived here for 30 years, but I am from Israel.
But
You've lived here for 30 years and you don't consider yourself an American.
No.
But that is part of the hope, that we're actually able to talk to each other. And throughout all war times, Palestinian and Israeli women were communicating with each other. And in my work, let me ask you yesterday I was on Skype with a Sri Lankan colleague who's working on training the police in Sri Lanka to not commit gender-based violence and sexual violence and prevent it in the north where they have displaced people. I got an email from a Pakistani colleague who works on de-radicalization of Talib youths in Pakistan. I work with Syrians who are working for peace and nonviolence in Syria with barrel bombs dropping on them. And they do not want weapons going in, and they want more peace. That's what gives me hope, because wherever I work with women in conflict zones, and whenever I lose hope, and I lose hope because of the cynicism and the inertia and the plain stupidity of some of the policymakers we work with internationally, when I start talking to my colleagues on the ground, they are my hope. So my job is to carry that hope.
Yes, the women are doing the work. Part of the problem, part of the obstacles is that the work becomes invisible. I was telling Huda before, it was 10 or 15 years of work of Israeli and Palestinian women doing almost underground that led to the Oslo meetings. regardless of what you think about the Oslo Accord, it's the men who got the credit for it, even though the women paved the way for years. History continues to render women's work invisible. Thank you. My second question is, what are the actual struggles that you face? And what helps you overcome the struggles? It's a little bit different. It's because the reason I'm asking this question is that one of the things that the culture teaches us to do is to posture, to say that everything is good, everything is working. And I think if we're going to inspire other women to take leadership, I want us to tell them the truth about how hard it is and what helps. So, Sanam, you want to take the lead this time?
Could you hold the microphone right next to your mouth?
Here? Is that better? So I struggle with this idea that we have peace processes that have failed over and over, and it's not just Israel. It is around the world. 90% of countries that were in conflict in the last 10 years had conflict in the previous 30 years. So the way that we are doing peacemaking is not working. If these guys were your heart surgeons, you would have fired them a long time. They have many lives in their hands. The research, the experience, and the research now shows us that if you have civil society involved in peace processes, the chance of failure goes down by 64%. In other words, the parties the chance of them reneging on the agreements that they make goes down by 64%. This, to me, is logic in terms of where we should be taking the paradigm of peacemaking in the 21st century with the types of conflicts that we're dealing with. I think my English is good enough to explain this in a fairly clear manner. I tell you, sometimes I feel as if I'm speaking a completely different language when I'm talking to policymakers about this. So that's one struggle. How do I get through their mindset of thinking that they know best, that they just know best, that they're unwilling to take the research, the experience, the policies, the directives that they're given to follow, and still insist that they tend to be, sorry, but older men, that they know best, and so that's number one. The second thing is this question of the double barrier for women. That when we say women, we're really talking about women who are active on the ground doing peacemaking work. Those are the voices we want in. Those are the people who are committed to peace. Why shouldn't they be part of the process? Why do we just talk to spoilers? And very often we're told, who are these women? The barrier for entry is if you're really violent and you have a gun, you get to be okay, Taliban versus the Afghan army, let's say. Why don't we ever recognize good work and people who are committed to peace and recognize that they are as important, if not more important, to the process? And because it's often women, it's that double-edged sword. Again, I'm like, maybe I just don't speak language, whatever language it is that they speak very well. But this is a persistent struggle that I appreciate any assistance.
Thank you.
So I want to take it from exactly from where you left it, because it's not about understanding. It's about the will to understand. They don't understand because they don't want to understand. Because that is where I found you so optimistic. And that is, I think we need to realize that as far as what we as women are fighting for, it's about a power struggle. It's about resources. It is about who owns what, who gets to make the decisions. We are in a world where, according to the UN report on women from 2010, 99% of all assets in the world are in the hands of men. It's not that they are about to give it up that easily. I'm sorry, I'm sure the guys here, in a different position completely, and I very willingly will give away whatever they have to the women sitting next to them. and we need to realize that, because as much as we want the discussion to be not adversary, but rather mediative or cooperative or whatever, it is a fight over power and place in the world. And the second floor of that, the second level, is that it is being abused on us through the gender division, the way they make us into women. And this is where I think we have a really weak spot, is that we give in to that. The way we believe that we can be as smart, powerful, successful, but we shouldn't give up on being women, which means we can't give up on being vulnerable, weak, sexual, the way men want to see us, sexual, is where we keep on dragging the rug and rug.
I think part, and I'm going to speak from my personal experience, part of the challenge comes from the women community itself. Like, there is a huge work that I have to do to convince women to participate in programs that have to do with empowering women, though I protest the word empowering. They already come empowered to their room. But there is that drag to get them to get into a program that would enable them to be politically more active. And that's what we are talking about here, is that being a woman kind of like doesn't fit to be also a politician. And the examples in the field also prove that to be a woman in the politician's world, you have to be a man enough to be in that position. So we have women who became men rather than being women, and admitting that they have their own weaknesses, but they have also their strengths. So we don't actually have that many examples to follow, not because they don't exist, it's because they were deliberately eliminated from the history of women in general. So in the history of Islam, there were so many women who did a great job being examples of women leaders. But still, men in that community kind of took that out and kept only the fallen women picture in the history. So this is something that we need to work on, is to raise the awareness about examples that existed for thousands of years, and even move forward to look at what's happening here now in the world, like in the case of Egypt, where women been in the forefront of asking for social change in Egypt, yet they were not given enough credit, or were used in a way that it's more a cliche rather than a genuine kind of admission of their work. So the struggle comes from different fields, from different forces, but I think the answer for that is to become more aware of these challenges and struggles.
Thank you. I think I want to save the last identical question to the very end, and now ask you the specific questions that I want to ask each one of you based on the specific work that you do. So, Huda, I'd like to ask you first. What are the forces, both internal and external, that need to change for women to take a larger role in peace-building efforts in Palestine?
Okay, that's a very, very, I chose that question. I think when it was in Palestine, it was appropriate. I think one of the main challenges is the educational system in general, both formal and informal educational systems. You grow up in a society where women are given a certain role that they have to fulfill, and you are to follow that, and if you rebel in a way or another, the first to tell you not to do that is your mom. So it's basically, we need to change that kind of culture that women should not be out there. The second is the education and the formal education system, where it highlights mostly the heroes, and most of these heroes are men. And with respect to them and their contribution to the society, they still, in my opinion, fail to bring us to a better place in general, in the whole world, not just in Palestine. So one of my observations of the political scene in Palestine is that the negotiators in the peace process are almost the same people. They don't die. They don't die. They don't get sick. They don't travel. They don't even read books or follow statistics. So this is really annoying for the Palestinians in general, not just the women in Palestine, it's just the Palestinians in general. What happened to us? Are we not able to produce And we do produce a lot, but we still cannot get to a point where we have an effective leadership. So we have a crisis when it comes to leadership. So education that brings or gets to a place where we can actually have leaders among us, and the fact that the culture still thinks that women should stay home.
Sanam, you get the second question. And the second question is, from what you see as the latest developments in peace building and civil society in the world, what can women in Israel and Palestine learn so that they can improve their efforts?
First of all, women in Israel and Palestine have done so much that the rest of the world should be learning from them. And I think that's part of the problem, that there's been an isolation of the kind of work that they've done and how that translates. And you know, people like Anna Nashrawi, Naomi Khazan, I mean, there are phenomenal Palestinian women leaders, there are phenomenal Israeli women leaders, and that experience needs to be captured. So that's one thing. But I think that right now, we're, as I said, to me, where we need to go is, if it's true that 2/3 of the population in Palestine and Israel wants peace, and you get the same guys over and over, I mean, it is literally the same guys on the Israeli side, on the Palestinian, on the American side, everybody's failing upwards. How, you know, why do we trust these guys? Why do we trust that they're going to come together to Annapolis or wherever it is, and they're going to, it doesn't matter, and the result is going to be different. The paradigm has to change, and I think that what we have in place, for example, in the United States, is with the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and 6 other resolutions that say women and civil society, not just women, but civil society should be present in peace processes. And we have the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security that says the U.S., in its foreign policy efforts, must include women and engage in support. On the U.S. side, we need to be taking that to Secretary Kerry or whoever the next guy is or the next woman is, and saying, this is what implementation looks like. And unless you start doing this in this case and in other cases, and maybe have American women there. I don't, we can have American women here, Israeli women there, Palestinian. That we have an overarching framework that everybody can apply and adopt in their own ways to change the face of who is involved in these processes and hold these people accountable to what their own constituents actually want. I think that's really the place where we have to take it, and it follows on with what Jeremy was saying as well.
Thank you. So what I'm seeing from what all of you are saying is that there is actually a global presence of women doing work, and they are facing enormous obstacles that are entrenched, both within their cultures and within the political structure of the world. And it's a major uphill struggle to figure out where to find hope, where to find tools, where to find new ways of even working for change. What do you do when you face someone who says, I know it all? How do you face them effectively? So I want to now ask you the final question before opening it. Oh, I'm so sorry.
You're so attentive.
Oh, yeah, I do too. So the question is, I'm quoting you. You've said, feminist thinking can change the entire way we think about society and state. Can you elaborate?
Yes, I can. So first of all, I think we need to acknowledge that what we're talking about here is not women, but rather feminists and feminism. Because women are not necessarily everything that we've been saying here since the panel started. And I know, I'm sure Huda can also testify, but I know that in Israel we have many women who do not at all subscribe to anything that we say here. And I will say something that's even more profound, and that is that I think that in general, even though this country, both Palestine and Israel, wants peace, still when it comes down to like the first relevant, specific, particular thing, women will put their nationality before their womanhood, before even their motherhood, which is supposed to be like the number one sort of weak, soft spot for women, and will not question the, not even occur to them that they have a right not to cooperate with sending their children off to war just because the same men keep sending them to war. So I think this is the shift that we need to make. Because I think it's not only that men are in politics, in leadership, it's that they have designed and created the mere frameworks that we live by. Not only the specific governments, but government as a concept. The fact that we have one prime minister, one president, one God, of course. The whole structure of the economy as we know it, the law, the legal system, everything was designed by men in order to arrange the needs of men among themselves, while we, not so long ago, were commodities in that, this way or another. So feminist thinking should really take a step back, because what we have been trying to do in the past 100 years when we've been led into the game. We were trying to sort of carve with little spoons, little changes in these huge rocks. And this is not enough. What we really need to do is really take a step back, look at the big picture, and try and revision the world. How would we want it to look like? Not just, accept for granted what we have and say, maybe we can better this or better that. We should really rethink how we want our relationship to look like, how we want the world to look like in every aspect, and not be afraid of that. And that is, I think, the challenge that we have. Now, what happened to us in the past 100 years, where on one hand we've made huge progress in so many fields and ways and aspects. And at the same time, we were taken really backwards by so many backlashes. And in many ways, we are stuck today where feminism has been beaten by the word gender. And gender is not at all a feminist word today, and not at all a feminist concept, but rather a word that reinforces gender in the most traditional way, both on us and on those frameworks which we want to change. So we need to go back to feminism and think, how do we apply feminism on really, to begin with, how do we apply it and rebuild our lives?
Thank you. Thank you for remembering. So the last question that I want you to think about is, where it came to me from is, there's so many times that we sit in groups and listen to people and are inspired, and we don't know what to do afterwards. So I was wondering if each of you could take a moment to think about what is something concrete, an action that when you look at the people sitting here, you can imagine each one of them taking in their lives.
I think the first thing that comes up to my mind, the reason why I participate in conferences like J Street, and by the way, I want to thank everybody who helped in bringing me here, is the fact that there is a chance for communication here. It's not just a paper in a journal or something. You see the real people who are doing the work, and you can see that the three of us could not even talk about the oppression that comes from the systems around us. Someone like me would be labeled as a normalizer, and I have to get in a conversation in order to change that kind of negative energy coming from it. The mere fact that I'm here can be seen as an act of aggression against my Palestinianhood. Yet still, we kind of focused on what's important in this room that has to do with being a woman on the ground, seeking peace and seeking justice and seeking equality. So I feel that what inspires me all the time is meeting new people, seeing new faces, and learning new narratives. I get so inspired when I work with women because their narratives are all about survivorhood. And I do appreciate that about women all the time, rather than about, if the talk is all about victimhood, then yes, we are comfortable. It's becoming a comfort zone to be a victim and just admit that you have all the world against you, and then you are entitled to do anything to justify your inability to do anything. So I think meeting people like you, knowing the fact that you have seen me and you know my story, when you think of Palestine and Palestinian women, you would see my friendly face, and you would think that all the Palestinian people and Palestinian women are not necessarily as portrayed in the mainstream media. So this is one way that inspires me. The other is to really actually take that voice that I present today and kind of communicate it to other people in your community. This is how change starts. And if we are looking at sustainable change from a feminist point of view, this is where it starts. Educate, 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 be active, even in the smallest way possible. So that's where I get my inspiration.
I thank you so much for articulating the thing you just did about victimhood. It's like so important that we realize that and that we start tackling that, because it is still almost non-politically correct to say it, and it's extremely important that we start talking about it. So thank you so much for that. I want to say that I want to encourage each and every one of us to remember that because often we feel that we're pawns on a big board, and that, what difference can we possibly make? What difference does it make what we do? Anyways, it's like in the hands of other people. So I urge you to remember that it does make a difference, that each and every one of us is a pawn, but many, many pawns together may definitely become weighty. So I urge you to, each and every little moment in our lives, when it feels like, in order to make the change, in our human limitations, we usually see the price that we pay for making a change. We rarely think of the gain there is in making this change, and even more rare is to see the price we pay if we do not make the change. So I urge you to do this whole calculation every time that you consider to do something that is out of your comfort zone or out of anyone else's comfort zone, and to remember that it accumulates. And if many of us will constantly do the things that we think will not make a difference, it will make a huge difference, and faster than we think it will.
One is, how many women's movements in the history of time have we had, in any part of the world, have we had that have used violence to further their gains of self-determination? There aren't, right? When women collectively organize, they don't use, we can be very disruptive, but we don't use violence. And yet this fact is well, this is unfortunately the direction that some people are going, which is really scary. But so my first thing is I urge you to remember that and not take nonviolent action for granted. It's very courageous work. And we need to constantly remember and elevate and look for it, because the media is not going to give it to you. you gotta look for it and search for it. Look up Syrian women activists and things like. I mean, just try and educate yourself in terms of what's going on and ask these questions so don't take it for granted. Number two, 15 years ago, there was no discussion about women at the peace table. We didn't have a policy framework. We didn't have the vocabulary. Now we have it, and it's everywhere. As I said, in Somalia, in Liberia, all over the world, people are doing this. And what I find interesting is that people get to a point where they're so tired. Women basically, I think there's a lot. Women can be very patient, but then at some point they just had enough, and then boom, you can't stop them. And they just go. I mean, you look at the women in Liberia and elsewhere, and I just think enough of the patience. We just need to take a stand. And instead of saying, oh, we can't, my organization is called I Can. What can I do? I mean, literally, what can you do? Just use the material. Educate yourself about what the material is, about what U.S. government policies are, and demand it. Get J Street to demand that the U.S. fulfills its National Action Plan, vis-a-vis the Israeli Palestinian process. We can find the language and so forth. And I think the other thing is to be inclusive of the different voices. To invite the Israeli women and the Palestinian women who've been doing the peace work, and hear them and learn from them in terms of their experiences. That kind of thing, for you to just know really what the history is, and I think is really very important. So those are some of the things. And in terms of the comfort zone, I hate it when people, often men, or even my mother, but in the best, possible, with the best possible intentions, is making decisions on my behalf. That I know better for you what's good for you. Type of thing. This is something we have to think about, and I'll put it on the table. When we were in the room earlier, the Palestinians decide to go to the UN to get statehood, right? If J Street is a pro-peace, two-state solution organization, then surely we should be respecting the choice of the other side if they are going to the UN. It doesn't make sense, or it's not good. Let them. Why? It would be so important to stand. So that notion of empathy, put yourselves in the shoes of the other side and think, what is it really like? Would I like that humanistic approach? I think is really, really important, and just shifting that debate. So those things I think would be really important. But right to carry, tell them this is nonsense. We need more voices, more light on that ridiculous nonsense.
And because this is so important, I want to just summarize what I'm getting. One is learn, learn, learn. Second is talk, talk, talk with people. Third is listen, listen, listen. And last is take risks everywhere that you are and grow stronger by facing the consequences. Thank you. So I want to open it. Go ahead. I'd like to do the questions a little differently. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to take 2 minutes to talk to someone else and think about your question in terms of moving beyond just personal curiosity to what's the question I could ask that will really benefit the whole. Not just my personal curiosity, kind of like take micro-leadership in framing your question. So let's take 2 minutes with each other to frame a question that might be serving everyone. about 10 minutes for questions, 10 to 12 minutes for questions. So I just want to see how many questions we have. Everybody raise their hand. We cannot possibly take all of them. So what I would like to do is, when you hear a previous question, listen for it. If some of what you wanted to ask is already covered, then you don't need to raise your hand again. So how about we start with you?
Right. I've been disappointed with this conference because it's framing the issues in the same old way. Last night, one of the action points was that the United States government should promote a particular framework and present it to the two parties. And I was appalled by that.
Can you frame the question as quickly as possible?
My question is, how can we get into a different mold? How can we break that mold? And what is a better approach, a different approach to trying to work towards peace?
Thank you. Which one of you wants to take this? See, one more person is deciding for you. Closer.
I think it's two things. I think one is, the U.S. has to decide if it's going to be an honest, impartial mediator, right? And if it isn't, then say it isn't, and take a side, right? And let somebody else come and do the middle ground work, right? So that's one thing that I think is important. The other thing, again, I'm in a universe where in 2012 I went to Israel and Palestine, and I met this amazing New York Jewish human rights activist lady, and she was the first person who was saying to me, I don't like the two-state solution. I'm married to a Palestinian. My children are both. They wouldn't fit in either. We should have one state, right? The one-state idea is out there, mainly because of settlements and all the things that want to. We don't talk about it here. It's awkward. I get it. But we need to reframe. And my hope actually was that the business leaders that I saw, the Israeli Palestinian business leaders that I saw in DC a few weeks ago, they came to speak, and they were talking about having, like Intel having a factory, headquarters and things like that across the region, and employing Palestinians and Israelis. And to me, and of course they were saying two-state, and I was thinking, I don't really care what you label it. To me, this sounds like a little mini EU, European Union, wherever, the French can be the French or the British can be the British. Really, we're talking about a movement of goods and people and a free. If you want to call it two-state because that sounds better, that's fine. But we need to think more as a vision of where we want to go. And what struck me when I talked to when I was in Israel in 2009 was I asked people, what's your vision of where you want to be in 5 years? Maybe that's the starting point. What's the vision of where we want to be? At the time, people said to me, we don't have a vision because we go to war every 2 years. And the next war they were telling me about was the war with Iran. At a time where in Iran, the mullahs were talking about that if your breasts and your hair is uncovered, we're going to have earthquakes. And I'm like, that's one conversation. It was a very interesting kind of. But it's that thing of where do we want to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and let's work it backwards. Because clearly, working forwards, a process that doesn't have a really clear vision doesn't get us anywhere. So maybe a vision of bringing all the different actors together and visioning together. Let's have a dream together. Why not? Why should that be any worse than what we've done so far?
Very, very consistent with what you said before. Let the people decide for themselves.
I just want to, please, as much as I love what you're saying, and I can add a lot to it, I just want to point out that and I don't know what Huda feels about it, but what I feel is that it's easy to say, but I think Palestinians are rightly, I don't want to say gently, need still this 19th century phase of nationalism of self-determination. I don't think, as a Palestinian, I would have been able to skip that phase today. So I don't know what you feel about it. I'd love to hear your feeling, but I think I wouldn't ignore this thing. As much as I love the vision, and I do.
Can I just add the vision? The other part of the vision is what you don't want. So what you want and what you don't want are two really important things. Where you want is just I shouldn't be deciding, right?
Even I shouldn't be doing that, but I think it's looking at the statistics. The Palestinian community is fairly young, so we have 74% of the population is between the ages 15 to 34. And when you talk to this huge amount of people, they don't actually relate to one state or two-state solution at this point. Some of them believe that the two-state solution is out of the door. It's not working, and it's because of the policies of settlements in the West Bank. It seems like people want to live with us. They don't want to leave us. The Israeli government is pushing people to the West Bank. So what does that mean, in our opinion, is that we are looking at a one-state solution. So the Palestinian youth, in general, are for the one-state solution, which is not the same when you look at the Israeli youth. The Israeli youth is tired, 18 years old, they are in the army. The army institution is a killer for any kind of soul, hope, anything. And I'm sorry that I'm saying that, but I work with many soldiers who have lost their interest even in life, not just in what's next on the Israeli-Palestinian cause. So I think what we need to start, where we need to start from, is to sit together in a room, in a living room, and do some sort of a dialogue that is both internal and external. What do the Palestinians want? Have we actually did anything to ask the refugees in refugee camps what they really want? No. Unfortunately, so far, we speak on their behalf, but we've not talked about it. Same thing happens in the Israeli society. I have heard that this morning that the settlers are the enemy. Everybody's talking about the settlers, everybody's talking about who supports the settlement movement, but nobody talks about why the settlers are in settlements. Why do they agree to go there? Is it ideological? Is it economy? Is it social? I have met Israelis who had never been into a settlement or talked to a settler. I talk to settlers, and I know where they are standing from their point of view. But that kind of conversation is a must in both the Israeli and Palestinian society, because we are really talking about a collective trauma here, and we need to talk about that openly and have the courage to do that.
Thank you. So there's a question of what is the solution and what is the path to the solution. And it's primarily what I'm hearing is the path has to include the people themselves. Yeah. Go ahead.
Referenced normalization. I was wondering if you and Merav could expand on what normalization means and how it affects Palestinians and Israelis in the peace process. I don't think everyone knows what you mean by normalization.
Okay. So I've been working in the Bay Area for 6 years as an executive director of Abraham's Vision, an organization to work with Israelis and Palestinians. And I didn't feel that normalization heat. I went back home and I thought it's normal to go and talk to Israelis anywhere in the world, in Palestine, in Israel, in Hebron, it's there. But it's not normal. There are laws against it. So Israelis are not allowed to come to Palestine, to A areas, by the Israeli law, LAW, and the Palestinians are not allowed to go there to talk about anything because they need a permit before. And if they are on the good side of the Israeli security, then they can get a permit, just like me. I have a permit and I can go there. But the question is really whether what I'm doing by crossing the checkpoint and going to talk with Israeli peace activists is normal or not. It's not normal. It's not a normal behavior. If you want to go and talk to your neighbors and you need to cross a checkpoint and be checked, literally humiliated, stripped out of everything that tells you that you are a human being, let alone a woman, because we get a special treatment on checkpoints as women. Yet, go. It's not normal. So that's how I explain normalization. Now, from a political point of view, normalization is talking to the enemy who actually makes you feel that it's normal to have occupation in the West Bank, it's normal to be occupied, it's normal to sit with Israelis using a permit. So I have different feelings when it comes to normalization. What makes me do the work is the purpose of it. So if we are going to give in to government laws to make us separated by walls, by laws, by normalization, by whatever, then we are not going to get anywhere. And I do also believe that most of the work, the normal work, has to happen within the society itself. The Israeli community needs to do a lot of work to address the collective trauma that has been used again and again in order to make them feel insecure. Security has different meanings in Israel. In Palestine, we have to address the whole conversation about PDS and normalization, and whether we are leaving the battlefield, again, I'm sorry I'm using that word, when you decide that not to participate in such a conference, you are actually leaving your space empty, and you're letting other people speaking on your behalf, and I'm not gonna let that happen. So this is where I stand from normalization and BDS. But who knows if I'm going to continue to be around for a long time, but it's not threatening. It's not life-threatening to me. I did not have anybody coming up to me telling me that I'm a traitor, yes, still. But if this has happened, I think it's worth an internal conversation on many levels.
I have to admit that in Israel, there is no such normalization discussion. Because of the different realities that we live in, which was very, I think it came across very strongly in our answering the previous question, because they're really two so very different realities, and we're in such different positions. Normalization in Israel is would sound when people would mention, those who would mention the Arab League initiative, which promised Israel, in return for a Palestinian state and solving whatever issues are on the table, normalization with the rest of the Arab League countries. So this is the only time, I think, that the word normalization would be heard, and again, it's not really an issue, because unfortunately, no Israeli government has ever responded to the Arab League initiative, and so again, it's a non-conversation. So, and this I think reflects very well this huge gap between the societies. And you say that, and I just want to acknowledge that, again, sometimes it's, for me, it's sometimes very difficult to state the obvious, but I will say it's so difficult for me to sit here as an Israeli and hear you describe your life and what you have to deal with, that I just feel the personal need to apologize as much as it is not, not worth a lot, but whatever.
Wow.
Thank you. How do I do this? There's only one more question. Go ahead, Marcia. You have honor of history.
I agree with Sanam that an organization like J Street, we said this in the very beginning, really it's imperative that this organization take up on 1325 very, very seriously, not just adopting it as a policy, but implementation. And I understand as well that this forum, the Women's Leadership Forum, is making that demand of J Street leadership. So my question is, and I think it's for anybody, my question is, given the talk about we have to take risks, we have to step out, what would be the response, what should be the response of the women leaders of this organization and other organizations who are making this demand and not being met?
Just do it. Why don't you invite, and we can, help organize, however, we can partner with different organizations in the States or elsewhere. Bring Israeli and Palestinian women who've been working on these issues for a number of years and sit and talk and strategize with them in terms of what they say they want you to do here in terms of lobbying to the government in terms of your own organization. Just make it a fact on the ground. Sorry to bring a horrible term to the table, but when I started, when I was in England and I was asked to go and work on the Security Council resolution, I had no idea how the Security Council worked. I was just told, this is what you do. I had the voice of women that we consulted with. And thank God I didn't, because if I knew all the nuances of you're not meant to talk to government and you're not meant to do this and you're not meant to, I would have been completely stymied. I went because I believed in what I was doing and I just had all these women behind me and we just made it a reality. And then all of a sudden there was a Security Council resolution and 15 years later it's being used by women everywhere and they just make the fact, they just change the facts by their actions. So I think whether, just take the lead. Just take the lead and do what you need to do. If the organization kicks you out, that says something. Right? And if the organization, and if you do it and it works, then it's great and it's a reality that exists. That would be my advice.
Okay, I think that we are out of time. I'm going to skip most of what I might have said and just say that there's one thing that I want to add from the work that I'm doing, which is that a key element of creating change is being able to hear the people who are doing the most horrible things and see what it is that is important to them. So, for example, the people who are, those people who don't die, who do the negotiations. What's really important to them? Why are they choosing to do it? There is something there that is on the human plane you can relate to. The people who are opposing women's participation. If we really listen to them, then we can truly work as leaders of the whole in an idea of not like taking something away from them, but creating something that works better for everyone. That's my vision. Thank you, everyone. And where is I don't know where the chair is. She's not here.
Maybe one other thing that we can do in order to maybe create a better world is as women demand less air conditioning.
And I have instructions here to give you about the lunch. And I just want to express, please just take one more breath. I want to, just a second, I just want to say that I am in awe of just what you are doing and the poise and grace and wisdom and spontaneous care that you bring to this. And I am so honored to have been moderating this panel with all of you. Thank in particular the men who've chosen to come here. I want to honor you. Merav wants you to stand so we can honor you, the men. Thank you. And no, I think I'm honoring you about choosing to come to a women's leadership place. It's not something I take for granted.
We're here to give you a lift.
And I am also grateful for all the women who are making it a priority to keep learning and listening and making all the changes necessary so that we can step into full participation everywhere.
And I just Mickey, I just wanted to really thank you for doing a superb job. Yes. You really did a terrific job.
So I have lunch instructions. Lunch will be served in the atrium, and There are optional lunchtime sessions, including a discussion with these women, designed as a follow-up. That will start at 11:50 in the Beit Midrash on the second floor. Lunch boxes will be available in this room. I don't know when because they're not. So you do not need to stop in the atrium first.
So actually, lunch boxes are available if you're going to the Beit Midrash after this for the Women Leadership Forum lunch, and also if you're going to the chapter session, both upstairs, there will be lunch provided in those rooms. You don't need to grab. If you're going to Amy Eilberg's book talk and conversation, the rabbinic cabinet, then you should go grab some lunch and come back into this room.
Thank you.